You are listening to the Culinary Courtesan, the edutainment podcast about lifestyle, wine, and spirits. Hosted by Yolanda Shoshana. Let's get this party started. Hey, thanks so much for tuning into the Culinary Courtesan. I'm your host, Yolanda Shoshana. On this podcast, I get into lifestyle, wine, spirits, and travel. Today, I want to talk to you about Irish whiskey. So when you listen to this show, you will either be enjoying St. Patrick's Day or it'll be after St. Patrick's Day. Either way, Irish whiskey is a good spirit to get into your repertoire. I went to 2 wonderful launch parties for Irish whiskey this week, and I want to tell you about both of them because I think that they should be on your radar. Irish whiskey is actually growing in consumption in the United States. It grew about 9.4% in 2018, and I do believe that's only going to get higher because so much quality whiskey is coming out from Ireland, and people are willing to pay that top dollar for quality product. If you're a bourbon drinker and you've never had Irish whiskey, know that in Ireland, the whiskey tends to be less sweet. And if you're a Scotch drinker and you've never had an Irish whiskey, know that Irish whiskey tends to be less smoky. I feel like it's a great middle ground, and you'll find that so much of the Irish whiskey is smooth, and that is what we want. So the first party I went to was Knappogue Castle, and they it's the whiskey's named after a castle. Imagine that, right? A castle in Ireland. And it is a single malt whiskey, and it's made with Irish spring water and malted barley. And then the whiskeys are either finished in a bourbon cask or a sherry cask, depending on how long it's being aged. They have a 12-year, a 14, and a 16. And I got to try all of them. And I will say that they made some wonderful cocktails. I was so impressed with the cocktails that this whiskey was in that it was really wonderful. Now, I will also say that is also part bartender, because you can have a great spirit, and if the bartender doesn't know how to make a good drink, then it doesn't really matter. We were at Mr. Paradise, which is a new bar on the Lower East Side in New York City, which I highly recommend. Cute, quaint, and all about the cocktail, the art of the cocktail. So wonderful stuff. And a quote that Knappogue likes to say is, like a castle, every good cocktail begins with a solid foundation, which is their whiskey. And I also had their 21-year, and their 21-year whiskey is dynamite. So smooth. That was secretly going around the room, and I just enjoyed all of them. 12-year, 14, 16, and 21. And I believe they have some other special whiskeys as well. But I think you will enjoy these. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. So next up was a whiskey that's just hitting the USA right now called Red Spot whiskey. Now, and this is part of the Spot whiskeys. So Red Spot is part of Green Spot and Yellow Spot whiskey. And these whiskeys are actually owned by Jameson, but under a different label, and they have another thing going on. The distiller, Brian Nation, was actually in town. He's a hoot and a holler to take us through the tasting. We got to taste in Waterford Crystal, which was wonderful. Red Spot is a luxury whiskey. A bottle will cost you around $125. Really good stuff, I must say. It's aged for 15 years and triple distilled. And it's aged in seasoned casks, 3 different ones, from bourbon to Oloroso and Marsala. So you're going to get these very interesting flavors that come out of this whiskey due to the aging process. But I will say I also loved Green Spot, and I loved Yellow. I think Yellow may have been my favorite that night, which was a little, it's not as intense as Red Spot. Red Spot is definitely an intense whiskey. So if you know somebody who loves intense whiskeys or is a collector of whiskey, you want to give a gift, this is going to be the whiskey that you give to them. This whiskey has been absent for 50 years, and they brought it back from a recipe by the Mitchell brothers, who created it in the first place. And it was made in the early 1900s. And like I said, been gone for 50 years and people are so excited. So if you do see it and you want it, I highly recommend you get it then and there, because it is selling out, barely able to stay on the shelf. There will be more distribution, but it still will be limited distribution due to the fact that it is luxury. And I guess in a sense you could say it's small batch, but a lot of people in Ireland don't even know about it because it has been absent for 50 years. Like, younger whiskey drinkers are just now finding about it as well. So it's a hot item. And I would also recommend checking out Green Spot and Yellow Spot. The reason why these whiskeys have names after colors is because when they were distilling, the way to keep them separate was to put dots on the barrels. That way they knew which barrel was which I think is a cute and clever way to do it. But I highly enjoyed both of them, and different. Both of them are different in beautiful ways. So it just depends on what you're looking for. I'm going to also throw one more whiskey in here because up until this week, I actually, I had slept on Irish whiskey. I have more Scotch and bourbon in my apartment. I do have an Irish whiskey in my apartment, Writer's Tears, and I love that whiskey. I think last year I put up a recipe, and which you can find on my website, using it. I adore that whiskey. It's wonderful. I have yet to meet someone who hasn't liked it. So if you are trying to find an Irish whiskey that you like, besides the two that I recommended, I would check out Writer's Tears. It's just a wonderful, delightful, smooth whiskey that can be an introduction to Irish whiskey for somebody. Because the palate is making a transition in a way. It is different than bourbon for sure. And you're going to taste that as soon as you have it, but in a beautiful way, in a smooth way. And you can get your palate ready for all these other beautiful Irish whiskeys that are out there. But, I would try Green Spot and Yellow Spot as well as entry levels as well. If you are new to Irish whiskey, Red Spot just may be too much for you because, like I said, it is intense and it may scare you away from Irish whiskey. And if not, I would also go with Knappogue's 12-year or 14 and have that in a cocktail and start there because those were just great. So basically, don't sleep on Irish whiskey. There's a lot to try and a lot more coming out. It's a good time to check them out. So don't forget to sign up for my newsletter, Pompette, which I send out, and that has information on lifestyle, wine, spirits, and travel as well. Stop by my website, awitchandtheworld.com. If you're not following me on Instagram, you can find me at Yolanda Shoshana. I post lots of adult beverages. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, peace, love, and cheers.